Okay, hello. Hello everyone. Thanks for coming to the last talk of today. I know everybody is looking forward for the party, so see you there. My talk is going to be about interface-driven design. It's going to be about AI, because everything is AI. Let me introduce myself. But first, organizational notes. I will take questions in the end. You can put them on Slido. So my name is Tomas Rehak. I'm a CTO at Atlas Group Development, which is a purely Czech company with Czech products. We do a legal information system and some sort of a Microsoft Outlook. It's called MDS Online. It's for a government guaranteed communication between companies and the government. I was allocated 20 minutes for this talk. This is from my favorite movie. It immediately came to my mind.
7 minutes, sir.
I will talk for 14 hours, and 3 of those will be untranslatable, literally baby noises.
So if you know Dictator, you'll love it. What I'm going to talk about the communication and context. We'll take a look if the mole can speak, if it can tell you something, about interface, about service interface, and then some prospects into the coding in the AI era. And then I will give some my conclusions. So, is anyone familiar with this picture? Has anyone seen it before? It's called a transactional communication model. It basically says that the communication is dependent on the context and of the setting and the prior knowledge of the communicator and the one who receives the communication. So if you are talking, for example, to somebody from your town, he will know what you refer to. But if you're talking to someone from the other side of the world, you have to explain a lot of context. And it's very similar to talking to ChatGPT. If you just put a very simple phrase, it can have a lot of meanings, so you have to clarify. So effective communication with AI, in my opinion, mirrors communication between humans. You have to make sure that you're on the same page. You have to make sure that the context is shared by both sides, and then you can just exchange short messages which fits in the context and you're better understood. And as always, responsibility is on the active side, so it's responsibility of you as a communicator to deliver your message, to make sure that the other side understands. So back to the mole. If you ask ChatGPT if the mole can speak, naturally it says no. The moles, like many other animals, can make sounds like but they cannot speak. But if you ask ChatGPT in Czech, umí krtek mluvit? Is anyone familiar with krtek? Yeah, oh yeah, cool. Yeah, so you know it's like cartoon character, and it sometimes speaks its anthropomorphized version. So ChatGPT, I guess it's because of the language, tells you that yes, krtek, known as krteček, it's an animated character, it can speak. And then you switch to English, but it still remembers the context. So you build a shared context, and then you can refer to it later. So the interface. We just used ChatGPT interface. I think everybody knows, at least on some intuitive level, what the interface is. It's a point of interaction. On this slide, we can see a document. So if you want to send a package in Czech Republic using traditional post service, you have to like fill this paper, which is something like HTTP header, but in the real world, and put it with your package. So the post office know how to deliver it. Interfaces should be clear, well-defined. They should follow solid principles, etc. There's nothing new. They hide complexity. You don't know. You don't have to know how the post office works. It just works. You just use the interface, and it provides valuable functionality to you. In the age of LLM, you can imagine that it represents a context boundary, because, as you know, context windows are limited. So if we make a boundary bounded off with interface, it can be useful. It's useful for both people and LLMs, but there are some trade-offs in using interfaces. Services. What is a service? It's a unit of functionality. It usually has an interface. And what is a service interface? It's easy to define interface in software because there is like no room at all for any context interpretation, because most of the software services have well-defined inputs, well-defined internal logic, and well-defined outputs. So you know what to expect. ChatGPT or other LLMs are, of course, are of course not so simple services, because their internal structure is complicated. It's not deterministic. So it's easy for software services. It's very hard for soft services or for services that includes human. For example, we can think about a legal department in your company. You can think about customer support. You can think about your product manager. Do you always understand your product manager? Do you know, like, when he says something, do you get it? Or do you have to ask questions to get some more context? Most of the time, you have to ask questions to clarify, to get to know why you are building something that you are building. And these questions, you are just taking context from another guy, another side. So you are poking into his context and trying to take some of this context and some of this knowledge into your own context, so we understand better the communication. Currently, we're living in a world where soft services should be interfaced off, because there is no person on the planet that knows everything. You cannot be a perfect lawyer, you cannot be a perfect product manager, you cannot be an excellent software engineer, not all at once. You can be either of that, but not everything at all. But this is a limitation which is like biological. So in my opinion, I think that AI, maybe some future versions of LLMs, will be able to get all the context and will be able to perform well in every role we ask them. These interfaces, as I said in the example with the product manager, there's a certain trade-off. The trade-off is that by interface you limit the communication boundaries, so you lower the bandwidth of the communication with the other side. And it's always a good idea to use interfaces in software development as well. Like, for example, you have large service, you split it into microservices, you assign each service to team, so they can work like together, but the context is separated. It's because of the complexity reduction. The question is whether this will still be needed in the AI era, when we have LLMs like Google, just they have 1 million context window, working on 2 million, working on 10 million. There's an unlimited context window in research. So if you have unlimited context and you have very good reasoning skills, do you still need interfaces? Do you still need to separate it? So now comes my glimpse into the future. right now, the AI copilots everywhere. You have a copilot in your IDE, you have a copilot in your Microsoft Office, and as a developer, usually, like we discussed with my colleagues, how we use it, how we use the copilot. So, for example, if we want to create a repository, we just take the SQL script that creates the table, just copy paste it into the class, make it a command, and then just you push tab, 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 and it creates methods for you because it understands the context. And it should understand the interface because you say create a CRUD repository. I just need a simple repository, and it works very well because it has all the information. It has the context. It has a prior knowledge of how to build, how to use JDBC templates, for example, and it has an interface specification. So as some of the speakers before me, there was a lot of talks about LLMs said, and I have to agree with them, that in the future, not so distant, maybe half a year, maybe 2 years, maybe 5 years, most of the work that we will do will be in designing services, and not just software services, but units in organization, defining interfaces, defining context that is needed. And the more context we have, the more information we have. And like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it was useless to just collect all the information, collect the huge context, because there was no way to process the context. So you could record all the customer calls, you could record all the meetings, but there was no way to process it. So you just like threw it away and kept a distilled version of this information. So we were taking notes. But now, I think it would be worth it to acquire as much organization context as you can. I think everything should be in the organization context. There should be corporate secrets. There should be a code base. There should be all the calls, for example, for customers. There should be all the interviews that the HR does. Everything is a part of organizational context. The only difference is that nowadays, the context is very fragmented, and it's just in the heads of the people. And it's our work, you know, as software engineers to replace people and to automate stuff. So we should think how. So I think that in the near future, we will see emergence of AI models which will be custom trained on organization context. And they will know everything, so there will be no explanation required. So, for example, you have to build a certain login or certain tracing aspects into your application to be compliant from the legal point of view, you know. So nowadays, a product manager comes to you and says, hey, legal says that we should do this, then he has to explain it to you, blah, blah, blah. But once this is all in the shared context, you just define service interface, or you tell AI what you want to build, and it knows that it has to, you know, adhere to certain aspects of the code because it's in the context of the application. So in my conclusion, the software is eating the world, the AI is eating the world. We should use interfaces to shield off complexity for now. We should collect as much of the context that we can collect. And we should modify the processes and modify the way we work and the way we think to have everything written down, everything recorded for future use. But the definition of interfaces in software, I think it's just a temporary thing. I think it's just for now, because before everything is AI, before everything is in a large AI context, and it just like does most of the stuff out of the box. So that's my take on the future. Thank you for listening. Are there any questions? Thanks. See. Should we, as software developers, worry about our jobs? Yes, I think so. I don't know. Like, there's a joke I heard that in order to get a good output from AI, you have to clearly explain what you want, which is not happening in the software development because users, they don't know what they want. They don't know how to explain it. So maybe this will be our job. I'm not sure. That's it. No more questions? Okay. Thank you very much.